Hey gang, I had a really great conversation with the novelist Sam Lipsyte, who wrote the cover story for the May issue of Harper's about sex and technology, specifically robots and virtual reality. We talked about digisexuals. We talked about Las Vegas. We talked about Twitter. We talked about hackers locking a man's penis inside a cage. So this was a very interesting conversation. I will ask once again, if you enjoy this show, give it a 5-star rating on your podcast app, leave a positive review, tell your friends, share it on social media, etc., etc. Okay, enjoy. Hi, welcome to Culturally Determined. I'm your host, Aryeh Cohen-Wade, and my guest today is Sam Lipsyte. Sam, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Sam Lipsyte. I am a writer primarily of novels and short stories. Infrequently, I also do journalism. I teach fiction writing at Columbia University's School of the Arts.
Thank you for joining me on the show today. So we're going to be talking about a piece that you wrote for Harper's, and it was the cover story of the May issue. Robots, Virtual Reality, and the Future of Sex is what it says on the cover. The article itself, which we will link to in the show notes, it's called Ghosting the Machine, Humans, Robots, and the New Sexual Frontier, which you can find online on harpers.org. Well, first, what was the origin of this piece? Was it pitched to you? Did you want to do it? Where did the idea come from?
I wasn't sure I wanted to do it for sure. It was pitched to me. Really, a great editor at Harper's named Elizabeth Bryant. She edits articles, and I guess she also helps edit the reading section. And I think she had published a little bit either from a talk or an article written by an academic named Marty Twist. And it was about this idea of digisexuality, this new sexual identity. And it was just a little, maybe it was a couple paragraphs that she published in the reading section, but she, was kind of stayed interested in the topic and stayed in touch a little bit with this academic, Marky Twist. And so from what I gather, she then decided that she wanted to commission a longer piece about all of this stuff. And several times I asked her why she asked me. And I never really got a satisfactory answer, but I was intrigued. Often I think that as I said, I don't do a lot of journalism. I'm mostly a fiction writer, but when I go off and do an involved reported piece like this, it seems important that I be like the wrong guy for the job. That to me seems to be the way in for me. So, I'm a middle-aged writer with, kind of a technophobe. So I think it was, that's what intrigued me. It sort of it was a lot of things that I resisted in life were in this story. So I was interested. And so we figured out sometimes that this academic Marky Twist and another academic, a philosophy professor from Canada named Neil MacArthur, were presenting together. And it turned out they were giving a series of talks at this museum, the Erotic Heritage Museum in Las Vegas. And so it was decided that I would fly to Las Vegas for the weekend, attend the talk, hang out with them, and see what happened.
Right. So the piece is very much like your experience of this event and being in Las Vegas in general. And you present, the scene of pandemic, era Las Vegas in addition to.
And that's a pretty grim, yeah.
Yeah. Talking about this idea of digisexuality, which did they come up with that term themselves, the two academics, or is that?
They didn't, I don't think they coined it, but they've been popularizing it. And another term that's in play is robosexual, but they seem for digisexual.
Okay. And there's over the past 5 or so years, various neologisms have emerged related to sexuality, and sapiosexual would be one of them. That's people who need
smart people. Is that what that is?
Yeah. Or they need to feel an intellectual attraction before physical. At least that definition might be slightly off. And then there's also like demisexual, and a lot of this stuff sort of bubbled up from Tumblr, I think, online, and has spread. And then you see people who identify this way. But so are there people, so they're predicting that this is going to be like the wave of the future, but are there digisexuals self-identified out there now?
There are a few who like, so there are these kind of conferences and online, often online. Well, yeah, they're conferences. The one I first heard Marky Twist speak at was back last November, I guess. But there are people who call themselves robosexuals and digisexuals and talk about this. But I think that it's really more about finding a name for stuff that people are doing anyway. What their claim is that there will be a need to put a name to the what they see as an increasing number of people who not only use technology, as probably a huge number of us already do, for sexual purposes, but use it without other humans involved in any way. Meaning using sex bots or VR and computer generated sexual partners and so forth. So they're saying, and they describe, as I say in the article, they describe it in two waves. The first wave of digisexuality is what we've been having for the last 20, 30 years. And, it includes all the ways that people use, chat rooms and Skype or Zoom or control each other's sex toys remotely, all these kinds of things that people do already, but they're using it to connect to other people or be in the vicinity of other people. And they see second wave being, while being a continuum, some people will do both, there'll be some people who will be so immersed in just the technology, not really using it to connect with other people, but just sort of being in a completely digitized or robotic environment that we're going to need a name for it. And the reason they claim we're going to need a name for it is that there's going to be pushback on those people, persecution, there's going to be marginalization. And their idea is, let's skip the stigma stage. All sorts of sexuality sometimes goes through a stage of stigma, and so let's move past that. What they don't seem exactly certain about, because they think that the answer is really lies in how the technology itself develops, is what kind of identity this really is, how you could really define it, whether you can define it as really a sexual identity, like being gay, or is it a relational identity, like I'm polyamorous, or is it more about like a specific erotic preference, like kink or BDSM? And that's how they talk about it. Those are different categories that they're not, that have some fluidity between them, because it's not quite clear where this all will land. But they just feel that, I think they feel that space must be cleared to have this discussion.
So a lot of people have noted that like pornography, or the porn industry, has been an innovator in technology for a long time, and like early like pornographers and people distributing pornography very early into like home video cassettes and online, of course. And
Well, it would be like pornography in the military are the great innovators, right?
and so this is not pornography as we understand it, but it seems to occupy a middle ground. And then you also have two potential new technologies that people have been talking about for a long time: robots and virtual reality. And the robot stuff is usually talked about in terms of like robots taking our jobs away, or having like or maybe this is like Rosie the robot from the Jetsons or something, like having robots serving.
Right.
And then virtual reality,
But it always ends with we have to fight the robots, right?
Yes, correct? There's a dystopian aspect to this often, and the robots decide, that they know better than we do, and they need to eliminate humans. So there's always that fear. But it's more, the way it's been talked about the past 5 or so years is more about taking jobs away and just like a continuation of automation. And I guess you could, I don't know if you touched on this, but a sex robot, you could imagine taking a job away from a human sex worker.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a fear. But then like virtual reality is this thing that Mark Zuckerberg and other people think is truly the wave of the future. And Zuckerberg has like staked the future of Facebook on the metaverse being like the next evolution of the web. But his version, as you note, is like totally desexed. and he seems to
Right.
think just gonna be like a place where people have meetings,
Yeah.
and the little like avatars or whatever you would call them, the representation of other people in the things that they've shown of his metaverse, like the people have nothing like below the waist, like they're floating. They have no legs, but also no genitals.
Yeah.
So it would be impossible to have sex in Zuckerberg's metaverse because you're just like the top half of of a person with nothing below your belly button. But the like as porn innovated in streaming video and other things, like seemingly they will they will innovate in other ways, and Zuckerberg's metaverse will not be the only one, or will fail to take off or something. But how do you
Or
see that aspect of
or
it?
hackers, people may learn how to mod their avatars in the metaverse to attach genitals. One can imagine that as well. But yeah, I mean this is a big part of what the people I wrote about are thinking, because of Zuckerberg has said the metaverse will have Disney level measures of safety, right? He wants it. He wants it. That was a quote from him
Right, which
about
takes on a funny resonance given the past couple of weeks of
exactly.
of
Yeah.
controversy about whether Disney is secretly run by sexual deviants or whatever fantasy like the right wing has dreamed up. But
The groomer kingdom. But
right.
I think that the question is if Meta is not so the big problem is these people say is there's no sex tech on in your apps, in the app store. And so, where do you get this stuff? And also there's a big problem. The reason that sort of, people argue that, for instance, sex bots are kind of they're not that well developed at this point. It's not like Westworld or something.
Right. So you have an encounter. Well, we can describe it however you want. You meet a sex bot
I do.
whose
I
name
have a
is Emma,
conversation. His name is Emma, and
who's at this museum.
yes,
Um,
she's the
and
resident. She's the resident sex bot at the Erotic Heritage Museum.
right. And so I don't know if you want to spoil it or not, but the pieces at least you play with the reader, wondering whether what sort of encounter you're gonna have with the sex bot, and maybe you don't want to reveal exactly what it is. But the way
Yeah, go ahead. No, sorry.
well, the way you note at one point that when the people at the museum are showing you the sex bot, you have to wear latex gloves because touching the
Yeah.
fake skin, like the oils could degrade the object. And so like that, when that detailed big, we're like, oh, like you can't have sex with this, like if
Right,
you can't even touch it.
Yeah.
Like we're very far from the
Yeah, and
quote unquote dream.
I'm sure that there are better, more recent models with with better, more durable skin. This I have to imagine that they're not all shredding at the mere touch, or because people are buying them for whatever $5,000 or $6,000. So they must hold up a little bit better than this one in the museum. But yeah, there was in the writing of the article, and it's not a spoiler because I kind of frame it this way, but there's a lot of pressure on me to do something with this doll, from the editor, and then from every time I tell people about the piece I'm working on, they all they could say is, "Are you going to do it? Or are you going to do it?" So it kind of it builds in the piece this kind of horrible, I feel like almost peer pressure to have an encounter with this sex bot. And I won't say how that all goes, but yes, it was kind of the technology for the bots are not really, it's not there, like I said. So we're not, I think VR is definitely like further along, but I don't know. The thing is that if these huge companies, if the Googles and the Metas and so forth were really pumping money into it, who knows? But I think that they have a hard time raising money. A lot of these smaller outfits that are making sex dolls or developing VR, and maybe it will take, like, maybe that is a space where like something like a Pornhub or some juggernaut, some pornography juggernaut will move into that territory. I don't know. I'm very curious about it. If the Zuckerbergs are going to stay away, who's going to deal with that stuff? Because that stuff is that's a gold mine for somebody. It's just unclear who's going to dive into it.
Right. And so you note that Emma, this particular sex bot, sells online for $4,500. So that's a lot. I assume the average the average consumer is not ready to shell out that much for given the state of the technology or maybe ever where so yeah so that I don't know so the
Well, but
robotic
there are
aspect.
they are selling them to, people with some disposable income. And then I guess what these academics are interested in are the people that, there are people that take these dolls to the bar with them to go have a drink. And, they feel that they are in a relationship with these dolls. There's something kind of sad about it from my perspective, but I mean, who am I? But then as I get to say in the article, like in the end, who am I really to say? Everyone's pretty lonely in this world.
Yeah, and I think, and I mean that idea of a sex doll, not necessarily robotic, that a man, usually a man, like falls in love with and treats as a real human. I mean that there was a movie that came out 10 or more years ago
Okay.
called Lars and the Real Girl,
Yeah.
and that has been I don't know. I feel like you would see that sort of thing joked about on sitcoms in the 80s and 90s or something. Is just some guy who is either deluded or pretending to be deluded that the sex doll is the real
Yeah,
girlfriend or something.
it's an old trope for sure. And I remember Marky being very touched by the guy who put a mask on his doll to bring her out in public. The
A,
thing that
a COVID mask.
a COVID mask, yeah. The thing that becomes interesting, and this is something that they're kind of writing essays about, and there's an interesting anthology called Robot Sex, where a bunch of different, ethicists and philosophers are writing essays about the future of AI and the future of sex bots. You know, this was a big question that these two that I were interviewing, actually, even though they're partners in this in these papers that they write, they actually disagree on this. And this was, assuming that you get to a point where the robots are pretty advanced. What if you built child robots for people to have sex with? And is that as a therapeutic answer, as a deterrent from, real children being preyed upon?
Right.
That's where things get really strange. That's where the conversation gets very bizarre. But the counter to that, and one of them was like, yes, anything to help these people who are afflicted, who don't act on their impulses but are living these tortured lives. And that was, I think that was one of their positions. But the counter position is, more of I guess, a consequentialist idea of, you can't model this stuff, even if there's no victim in this case. You can't model it for a society. And so that's to me where like some of the questions about all this tech get kind of interesting.
Yeah, and you mentioned also the possibility of like a robotic animal or something. So if you want to have sex with a dolphin, you could have sex with a robo dolphin.
The Marky Twist, one of the academics I interviewed, told me that she's sexually attracted to dolphins, and so I don't think she would have non-consensual sex with a dolphin. Although there was a woman who famously did, and then the dolphin killed itself. That was in the 60s.
Okay, right. Yeah, and there was that documentary, my octopus teacher. I didn't watch that, but that was something people were talking about in the pandemic. But I think it was left ambiguous whether there was any sort of like sexual encounter between the octopus and the filmmaker. But yeah, I mean, and basically it seems like we're somewhat far away from a sex robot that has any sort of mainstream appeal. That sounds insane. But like maybe
they don't even move. That's
yeah. And you try to have a conversation. So they have some sort of AI and they talk, and you have a conversation with Emma, and it doesn't quite make sense. And then I guess she starts like saying her serial number or something at one point.
I think she glitches at a certain point. Yeah.
Okay. So that seems both like the cost, practicality. It just seems very, I don't know. It seems like we're like multiple like iterations away from anything like this or any sort of convincing human robot in general. Supposedly Elon Musk has some humanoid robot that would like carry heavy objects or something that he says he's working on. And don't bet against Elon, I guess. But that seems like it's decades away.
Well, I mean, I don't think we're that far away from robots that will do like heavy lifting and labor, and we have robotic factories and all of that. It's just something that you'd want to have sex with is a different.
Right. Although, if you see the robot that's very adept at whatever particular skill, then a certain type of person would be more likely to be attracted to it if it's humanoid. Okay,
competence can be sexy.
Yes. It seems to me like we're far away from the robot angle, but the virtual reality angle
Yeah.
seems closer. And then, okay, you could say you would pass, you could say having sex with a robot child or robot dolphin would bring censure upon you or something, or the company making it would be run out of town. But then if you think just writing a computer program that has a hologram or a virtual reality image of a child or a dolphin that you can have VR sex with, that seems like something that could maybe happen within 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
In general, or just anything in the virtual reality world. I don't know. It's like people have been saying like virtual reality is the next big thing for many years now as well. But like Zuckerberg shows that at least influential people who are very wealthy are trying to make it a thing. So would you agree with us that the virtual stuff seems like we're much closer to that having to deal with like whatever problems that brings?
Yeah, we're much closer to it, and I think that there's so many more possibilities of, as you said, you can just use your imagination to create worlds and be in them, and it's more immersive in a way of just to operate completely outside of your physical space,
Right.
and have and explore sexualities that you are not able because of geographical or physical or cultural reasons, to explore things that are not available to you otherwise. So that I think is a powerful idea. And that's sort of the idea that is driving some of this digisexuality, is that, there are so many people in the world who, live in a remote place or live in a place where, being gay, for instance, is dangerous, or have physical infirmities that make them marginalized in their own communities. And this is a space where they will be able to flourish sexually and achieve some modicum of the, and I guess the World Health Organization has even, said that, sex is a part of human health. And so there's this idea that maybe it can deliver that. What I was kind of interested in the piece, in terms of trying to find out what these academics have been thinking about, was where does, the market come in? Where does the algorithm come in? Where do, and there's a book that I mentioned by a guy in Australia named Rob Brooks. But anyway, the idea is how are you going to be, how are you going to be fleeced as you pursue this sexual flourishing? How will you be charged for upgrades? How will you be just at the point of, finally finding happiness? How many ads will you have to watch, or how is it all going to work? And I'm kind of interested, and we don't know that yet completely, but I'm kind of interested.
Right. Yeah. So there's like the tech angle and then like the capitalist angle.
Right.
And if you look at how tech companies in the past 20 years have actually made their money, it's mostly, well, I mean, it varies, but Facebook, Google, Twitter make money from ads, with maybe some people paying for a premium tier or something, or whereas, Apple generally makes its money from selling technology. But then you have like, I think you do mention like the freemium model, which is, which a lot, like if you download any like app games, most of them use this, where the app is free to download, but then you play a couple levels and then like it says like you're done for the day unless you subscribe, or you're like it gets really hard, but you can like buy like 3 extra lives or the ability to do like get a superpower or something like that. I think I don't know anything about like Fortnite in that world, but it seems like that's sort of the model there also, where like you buy a new power, a new costume, or something like that. And so
it was a model first developed by the corner dope dealer, I think.
so that'd be like first hit is free kind of
First one's free, yeah.
Right. And so that's, yeah. And so I stopped playing. There was a couple app games that I played a couple of years ago. I gave them up completely, but yeah, like Angry Birds and stuff like that. So it's sort of a gambling model. That's why the Las Vegas aspect is interesting. Is either you are enticed into paying, or you're sort of like get addicted to it.
Right.
And so your attention is constantly captured. And that's the addiction angle, is how things like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook often work. Is it sort of like, and someone was just making an interesting argument about Twitter, was that it gamified conversation and made it so that there were people who like won conversation for the day. And you feel like you're assembling points basically with every like and retweet. and that's like the addictive aspect they've hit upon. So if you add in sex to that, it it seems even more sinister.
Yeah, and more. Yes, that's a great way to describe Twitter. And yeah, that's you could see what it would be like if you're paying. Metaphorically, your pants are down, but now you have to pay.
Right. Yeah, and the other reason this world, the virtual world, seems closer is like there already is online pornography,
Yeah.
and this is and at least in most circumstances when you're consuming online pornography, you're probably by yourself. Not always, of course, but also you're probably not interacting currently with some sort of device in addition to whatever screen you're viewing the pornography on, and so some sort of merging of
Right.
like sex toys interacting with porn or live streaming or something. Like it doesn't need to be
Well,
like 3D like
well, I
that.
think that already. I was talking to somebody. I think that with pornography, like there's you go on and look at pornography, but it immediately kicks you into like a live cam site. They weren't looking for a live cam, but it would bring you
Okay.
into it. And so I think there's going to be a lot of like you're in one thing and it'll bring you into the next thing, and then you'll be like, and then it'll say, do isn't this great? Don't you want to pay for it?
Right. And if like you have some sort of device attached to your genitals to help you have
Right.
simulated sex, it's like this. And there, yeah, you mentioned offhand that there's
And
been
if the device attached to your genitals has your credit card number,
right.
but then you're not even thinking at all. It's just all
Right. Yeah. So that's like the two brains
yeah.
thesis. And people get addicted to online shopping even when, their genitals are not directly connected. But
Yeah.
there have been these bizarre stories that pop up about sex toys that have some online aspects. So it's like, like a butt plug or something that you like your lover or your madam or whatever, your mistress, can control through an app, and that's like their kink. But then like these can be hacked. And
Yes.
and there was one story that went viral a couple of years ago of some sort of what is the term? There's like a chastity belt kind of thing. Like there's a fetish about men putting their penises in chastity belts, and then there's like an online enabled one of these, like so it can like lock and unlock basically. And the guy who made this was maybe a Reddit post or something. Someone did it, so possibly it was made up, but seemingly their chastity belt thing had been hacked. And then the hacker was like, if you don't give me $500, like your penis is stuck to there forever. And yeah, so that that seems like a possible threat as well, that any aspect of this could nefarious
Absolutely.
actors could get involved.
I write about that a little bit in the article. That I mean, the term that people use is teledildonics. But yes, security is a big problem with sex toys, with remotely controlled sex toys. They get hacked all the time, apparently. And yes, with the stuff we're talking about, obviously there could be all sorts of security breaching. So, that's really, that I think that's a big question about all of this too.
Yeah, if you're inserting part of your body, any part of your body, into some sort of device that is on the web or something, like that seems possibly dangerous. And
But
yeah,
that ties back in some ways to the question of, digisexuals as a persecuted class. And if you have to like hide the fact from, you can't go to work today because your penis is caught in a device that's being controlled by someone who's extorting money from you. And you can't even speak honestly about it because you'll be, persecuted at work and fired, or the way maybe like if 100 years ago, if you were gay and picked up in a public park by the cops, and then your work found out, like so one can draw parallels between that if one wanted to.
right. And then the question of whether this is more an identity
Right.
or a kink or something in between.
Or a bad idea. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's a conversation you don't want to have with your manager, is that you can't come in because hackers locked your penis in a cage.
Right.
You don't want to tell
Exactly.
anyone that. And so, yeah, so there are also this like, but the stigma aspect is attached to that of like, oh, what a loser who needs to lock, or like the only way they can get anything is through virtual reality or a robot or something.
Right.
And that, the social stigma aspect of it is attached, which
Well, but that's better than, oh, those goddamn digisexuals are ruining the fabric of of our country, and they need to be stopped and put in, put
Right,
in prison.
which may be coming given the way like the discourse, such as it is, has unfolded around like with the whole like this ridiculous groomer
Yeah.
nonsense that people in the
No,
right
it's
have
very
promoted.
real. That, I mean, I think the threat of that kind of thing is very real.
Right. Okay, so let me ask you more about the Las Vegas aspect of this and why you
Sure.
decided to include that in the piece. And you talk about people you meet and have a conversation with, and also like gambling yourself and losing some money. Why did you decide to include that part in the essay?
Well, I mean, I just think of like their talk was in this museum in Las Vegas. And so it seemed kind of perfect. This, I think I call in the beginning of the piece, I call Las Vegas the capital of magical thinking. And it's sort of like all of these ideas of I'm going to find some sort of fulfillment. I'm going to get rich. I'm going to have sex. I'm going to party. I'm going to our sort of most hopeful ideas about very addictive behaviors gain a certain kind of traction in Las Vegas. Even those lines, that famous line about, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, as though like all these great things are happening in Vegas. And it's really kind of a pretty sad place, for the most part. But also I sort of went with this idea, and this is part of the piece, that I've struggled with all sorts of, addictive behaviors, but gambling was never my thing. I was never into gambling. And so it's sort of about the piece also, while I'm also writing about this digisexual talk and these kind of philosophical ideas, I'm descending into a newfound gambling problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even like a very sophisticated gambling problem, because I'm mostly just playing slots. And so I play a little bit, I lose, and I say, I'm not one of those people. I'm not some like bot. And basically I distance myself from, these robotic people who keep feeding money into the machines or laying down money at the table and losing. And I'm very adamant about how I'm not one of those people. And I feel very superior to those people. Even though I sort of find myself slipping into that, I pull back and I gather myself and I report my story, and I take notes, hang out, have conversations, but I keep getting pulled back onto the gambling floor. So I kind of describe that hellish journey in the piece as well. And I won't give away where it ends, but I sort of come to a certain realization about myself in relation to both the idea of digisexuality and the idea of what it means to be a human versus a robot. And I come to some grim conclusion.
Right. Yeah. And so there is something kind of perfect about this the event you attend at this erotic heritage museum or whatever, being in Las Vegas, which is sort of, I don't know, like it's funny. Yeah, you mentioned what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, but like America seems to be becoming more Vegas like as time goes on. And like gambling in particular, and like being able to gamble using an app on your phone has really increased just in the past couple years. And you see ads for it everywhere now, both like sports book betting was, I guess, legalized in New York State during the pandemic, and you see the ads for it everywhere. And then also,
are they going to build a casino in New York, closer to Manhattan? I thought I read that.
Yeah, there's I think Eric Adams had an idea for a casino in New York, and obviously like legalized casinos continue to expand. And then there's also it varies by state, I assume, but at least where I live in New Jersey, you can do some sort of like gambling at the Atlantic City casinos on your app. And so it's like Las Vegas is now in your pocket basically. And this seems like, I haven't seen that many people comment upon this, but like it seems like really bad for like everyone involved except the casino, and like the house always wins. That's true. Like it wouldn't exist if they're not just fleecing tons and tons of regular people, and a very small amount of people end up winning, but the vast majority lose. And then it's just like we're enabling another addictive activity, and one that's like truly antisocial if you're just gambling on your app. I don't know. It makes me feel, well, I don't know. I've seen the only like intellectual I've seen writing about this is a woman was writing like the Heritage Foundation or something like there, but it just seems like states see this as an easy way to get tax revenue without it's like raising the liquor tax or something, but it affects fewer people, but you're just
I don't know. I mean, I think with the sports betting, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money over the next few years.
it just seems like a disaster
Yeah.
waiting to happen, and creating like people who didn't have this addiction before is now going to be created
Right.
for them through these apps and systems. It just seems horrible to me. So
I never bet on sports in my life. I will watch sports sometimes. But suddenly I remember even recently, I just thought, well, I can legally bet on this game right now. And that suddenly I got this little surge of excitement. Like that would make it even more fun to watch. And that's dangerous. I think I've known a few people in my life that could systematically gamble a little bit of money each year. They set aside a few $1,000s that they were going to bet on football or something each year. And they would, clear a couple of thousand because they knew what they were doing. And it was like a hobby that made them a tiny profit. But most people, I think, and I'm one of them, would not be like that. And it's very scary. And it's almost like if the states are doing this to raise revenue, they're destroying their states as well. So then they're going to be spending all that revenue on services for the people who have been destroyed.
Yeah, and it like a world where there were limited places where you could gamble, and like a state-run lottery, like those make sense in a way. And I remember years ago someone making the case that the lottery is sort of exploitative of poor people and people who don't understand the odds. But like if you didn't have that, like the neighborhood book games that like flourished in like the early part of the 20th century, those would just return. And so that it's like at least you remove like the violence and the money is like going to education or something. And people, there's certain activities that people are going to do, whether they're legal or not legal, of course.
Well, the history of like numbers rackets in major American cities is kind of fascinating.
Right. Yeah. And it used to be like, the like final two digits in the stock market close of the previous day, like, all these like corner stores and stuff would be running numbers games based on that. And, that was just how it was. But yeah, it seems bad overall. And then it also like the gamification aspect of, information technology. Like if you're playing one of these stupid app games, often something will happen where it's like you play for 20 minutes and then it's like, okay, now it's time to like spin the wheel. And it's like, da, 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 da. And so you're getting some sort of simulation of gambling. And it's like, oh, you got a free life, or you get nothing, or you can spin again or something. So that the natural human attraction to like a game of chance or something is incorporated into this addiction world that apps and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram have created. So it all seems very bad.
Right. Well, basically you can like, lose a ton of money and then, drown your sorrows paying for sex, all without leaving your room and never seeing another human being.
Right. And if like, I think it does vary, but like whether you can get alcohol delivered via like Uber or, Grubhub or that kind of thing. Like you don't even have to leave your house to ruin your life. Whereas, before there was, you had to go to the corner bar or something at least. So yeah,
now you have to leave the house to save your life.
Right.
Find one other human being and just, hold on for dear life. Just talk it through.
Yeah. And well, there was like a moment last summer when it seemed like the pandemic was over, when people were like, okay, I've been looking at a screen for the last year and I finally want to get back to like human interaction. And obviously a lot of people did do that, but I don't know, maybe we're like, that has helped push us over the hump or something, where we're still like totally fine staring at the screen all the time and not leaving our house. And then who is creating the things that we're looking at on the screen? It's often people who don't have our best interests at heart.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're still in this strange, like post-remote limbo. Like some people have gone back to work and we're kind of back, but we're still, I think emotionally, we're still in lockdown in a lot of ways.
Right. And there's some chance that, your penis could get stuck in the machine that is connected to the AI or something. Like you're not going to catch COVID or some other venereal disease from doing that kind of thing versus going out in the real world, interacting with another human. That, that danger is there. So you can see how that could also appeal to people who are traumatized by everything that's happened over the past couple of years.
Absolutely. I think they're preying on that too.
I think that's all I wanted to ask you about. Is there anything else you want to mention connected to the piece, or
No,
anything else you want to talk about?
No, I mean, I don't want to, I hope people will read it because I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there about this coming technology and sort of how we're going to negotiate it.
Yeah, and what I was saying earlier about how porn has sort of been on the forefront of technological change, like the things that I don't know, like the issues there end up becoming more issues not connected to sex and stuff, and just like sort of more general issues that I guess we should be thinking about because the technology does seem to be like coming around the bend. Okay, so the piece, Ghosting the Machine, Humans, Robots, and the New Sexual Frontier. You are Sam Lipsyte, primarily known as a novelist, but also writing nonfiction sometimes. Are you a Twitter person? Do you want to direct people to any particular place where they can keep track of what you're up to?
No, I'm not really on any platform, but I hope people will look at my books. Maybe I know that's kind of an old-fashioned idea, but you can go to my Amazon page.
Okay. And certainly there's nothing possibly, unethical about using Amazon or anything like that. Like that's fine. Okay. So
Well, no, I mean, okay, go to my Powell's page.
okay. Yes. IndieBound, is that the website that
I made Amazon metaphorically. I didn't mean the actual company.
Okay. Right. Yeah, there's no escape. I mean, at this point, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism is the cliche.
Oh yeah, no, and I'm not on Twitter out of, ethical concern. I know I would lose my mind and my time completely.
Yes, which perhaps has happened to me, but just like really think about Twitter as within this world of gambling, attention, like grabbing your attention. It's just like instead of winning or losing money, like you lose like your mind or your job or self-respect or the respect of your peers. So it's bad. Okay, but I am on Twitter and you can follow me at ARYHCW if you want to keep track of me slowly losing my mind. Okay, well, this has been a great conversation. So thank you, Sam. And thanks to all of the listeners out there.
Thank you very much.